The fading light filtered weakly through the curtains as I passed the living room doorway, only to freeze in place. Voices, a tense, hushed argument, reached my ears. My daughter Evelyn and her husband Richard, their tones sharp with something I hoped I was mishearing. Yet, as if drawn by a force, I lingered, catching the bite of their words. Richard's voice was low but cold, laced with contempt. He thinks he's too clever, holding everything tight. Old and slow. If we move fast, quietly chip away, he won't catch on before it's too late. Every syllable thudded in my chest like a hammer blow. I stood, fists clenched, feeling a sting that went beyond words, betrayal in its rawest form. All those years of sacrifice, guarding what little we had, only to be plotted against like an obstacle. Evelyn's voice cut sharper, colder. "You're wasting time worrying. He's too paranoid now, can't see that we need to get what's ours before he locks everything down further." My skin prickled with a mix of shock and rising fury. They spoke as if I were invisible, as if my decades of toil and love didn't mean a thing. At that moment, I stepped forward, controlling the storm inside my chest to keep my voice calm, though my hands trembled. This is betrayal, not just foolishness, but a deep wound to the family. Richard met my gaze with a flicker of annoyance, like I was a bothersome shadow. Evelyn's eyes were empty, dismissive. "You're imagining things, Father. Maybe you're losing touch with reality. We're just making choices for the future. You don't get to decide anymore." The words were a knife twisting in years of shared history. The daughter I raised, the man I welcomed as family, rejecting me so completely. I felt the air thin, the room shift beneath me, but I held myself steady. No yelling, no accusations, only a measured nod and a retreat. I left that room, silence stretching after me like a veil. My heart pounded, but my face wore the calm nothing betrayed. The role I had cherished, the protector, the steady provider, felt shattered by greed and cold calculation. Outside, the sun dipped low, echoing the sinking weight in my chest. Betrayal was no longer just a word. It was the fracture of trust, the end of the family I thought I knew. As I entered the quiet of my study, the room seemed smaller, every shadow a reminder of what was broken. My mind raced, but beneath the turmoil, clarity dawned. They saw me as weak, as an old man easily pushed aside. They were wrong. I was wounded, yes, but far from beaten. The man they dismissed would no longer stand silent. From the depths of this betrayal would rise a steady resolve, a promise that I would reclaim what was lost, not out of spite, but for justice. Tonight marked the end of the peace I once knew, but also the birth of a resolve forged in cold determination. I was still here, and I was ready. The stillness of the study felt oppressive, yet strangely familiar, a sanctuary layered with the musky scent of old books and polished wood, where countless nights had been spent lost in ledgers and calculations. I sank into the well-worn leather chair by the window, the one that had accompanied me through decades of toil, sacrifice, and dreams. As I closed my eyes, the floodgates of memory broke open, unbidden but needed. I was transported back to a younger version of myself, shoulders stooped under the weight of responsibility, but resolute. I recalled the countless evenings spent poring over financial statements long after everyone else had surrendered to sleep. Meals skipped or hastily eaten in the kitchen so I could stretch the budget just a little further. Months when I took on extra work at the bank to cover tuition fees for Evelyn. Whispers of worry stifled deep inside so she could soar. I remembered the pride that welled up the day she graduated. Preserved the original language of the text, eyes sparkling with promise. The scholarship she earned that first year was thanks to the stability I fought so hard to provide. The roof we kept over our heads even when the mortgage payments stretched us thin. Those sacrifices weren't just numbers or ledger entries. They were the foundation of a life I built for my family. Yet here I was now, staring at the same walls that had borne witness to every joyous milestone and painful struggle, feeling the bitter sting of ingratitude. The very people I had protected and nurtured plotted my undoing with cold calculation. The bitter taste of disillusionment settled deep in my throat. But alongside that pain, a quiet flame began to kindle, something I had not allowed myself to acknowledge until now. A fierce resolve, born from years of endurance and hardened by betrayal. I was not a man to be discarded or diminished without consequence. I had endured storms greater than this and emerged steadier and wiser. This was no time for despair, but for reflection and a strategic reclaiming of what was rightfully mine. I sat back and let my thoughts trail through every sacrifice. The late nights balancing budgets, the missed family gatherings to cover a shortfall, the pride and hope embedded in every dollar saved. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of my commitment, a reminder that this fight was not fueled by vengeance alone, but by a deep-seated quest for justice and recognition. The house was quiet save for the ticking of an old clock on the mantel, its steady rhythm echoing the pulse of my planning mind. I began to sift through the mental files of my life. Financial wisdom gained from decades at the bank, knowledge of credit, collateral, and debt structures, legal nuances hidden within contracts. The same tools I once wielded to build security could now serve to dismantle deceit. I recalled the foundation of my family's home, bought with life savings pooled across years of sacrifice, a tangible symbol of stability and love. That home stood not just as shelter, but as a monument to commitment and trust. And yet, trust had been breached in the worst possible way. I let my mind methodically trace each commitment I had made, the accounts I had managed, the payments I had ensured were met even in lean times, the documents bearing my name alone. Every detail was vital. The knowledge that the plans I overheard depended on exploiting my vulnerabilities made me sharpen my focus. I would not let age dull my mind. Instead, I would use every ounce of experience to anticipate their moves. As I dwelled on these memories, I realized something essential. To counteract this betrayal, I would need patience, precision, and a calm that I had cultivated over a lifetime. Wrath without purpose was a storm that burns bright and fades. My strength lay in calculated strategy, turning their greed against them with methods as subtle as they were unforgiving. The quiet of the night deepened, and I found clarity emerging from the tumult of my thoughts. Their assumption that I was powerless had blinded them to one critical truth. A lifetime of safeguarding wealth and navigating financial intricacies had honed me into a formidable adversary. The same caution and thoroughness that kept our family afloat were now tools for reclamation. I lit the desk lamp, illuminating a scattering of papers and ledgers I kept, remnants of my former life at the bank, and files I maintained out of habit and foresight. The task ahead would be painstaking, but I was no stranger to arduous work. Through this quiet reflection, the path began to unfold. Not in fits of anger, but in measured steps, each designed to dismantle their schemes and restore balance. More than anything, I recognized that this fight was personal. Far beyond the numbers, it concerned respect, dignity, and the wholeness of the family I once believed in. The betrayal cut deep, but my resolve to reclaim my place and to hold my family accountable was unyielding. I imagined the years ahead, not as an old man overshadowed by deception, but as a quiet force pressing forward with deliberate intent. The sacrifices of the past would not be erased by greed. They would fuel every move I made in pursuit of justice. As dawn approached, washing faint colors across the study walls, I felt a solemn peace settling within me. The journey ahead promised struggle and loss, but also a chance for redemption. This was not the end of my story, but a turning point. The man who sacrificed so much would now fight not only to protect what remained, but to command the respect he had long been denied. With restless determination, I prepared my mind for the days to come. The shadows of past sacrifices mingled with the sharp edge of present betrayal, carving a path toward reckoning and renewal. I was no longer just a victim of greed. I was a guardian of justice, patient and resolute, ready to reclaim what was mine. The fragile calm that I so carefully nurtured shattered abruptly when an old colleague from the bank appeared unexpectedly. His voice was measured, cautious, yet laden with urgency. "Harold, I've uncovered some troubling irregularities. Richard has been opening lines of credit under your name, secret accounts, unauthorized loans." Each word landed like a hammer strike, forcing the realization that their scheme was deeper and more insidious than I feared. They weren't merely planning to take from me. They had already begun siphoning funds right under my nose. That revelation burned through me, stoking a fire of anger and disbelief that took root deep within. But the pain and outrage I felt were eclipsed shortly after, when the final blow was dealt. Not in secret, but in full view at a family gathering. It was meant to be a moment of reconciliation, a gentle balm over the cracks forming beneath our facade. Yet Evelyn seized it as an opportunity to attack. She stood before friends and relatives, her voice sharp and accusing, labeling me paranoid, unstable, the source of discord tearing this family apart. The room grew heavy with tension, eyes averted or fixed in awkward sympathy. The daughter I had raised, the woman who once sought my guidance, now publicly cast me as the villain in a play where she and Richard were the innocent victims. It was an ignominious fall from the pedestal of respect I had built with painstaking care. Despite the sting, beneath the swelling tide of humiliation, something hardened within me. The clarity was startling. This was not an end. It was the spark that would ignite a new beginning. The misconception that age and patience made me weak was a fatal misjudgment. I would no longer be the silent victim relegated to the sidelines. Shifting from shock to strategy, the adopted a mindset long nurtured by years in banking, deliberate, painstaking, and exacting. I resolved to dismantle their designs methodically, starting with their most vulnerable foundation, their tangled finances. Every ledger and statement became ammunition as I revisited, scrutinizing minute details, transaction by transaction. Patterns of deceit emerged, intentionally falsified contracts, hidden debts masked as legitimate ventures, credit lines expanded behind closed doors. Each discovery fortified my resolve, turning outrage into meticulous plan. Rushing headlong into confrontation would be folly. Strategy demanded patience. I knew the value of subtlety and timing. To this end, I quietly enlisted the aid of trusted old friends, an attorney familiar with my character, and an old bank associate who could navigate financial networks discreetly. Together, we charted a course to freeze assets, alert creditors, and expose fraudulent tax filings, all carefully orchestrated to choke their financial lifelines without premature warning. Nights were consumed with calculations and plotting, mental chess played out in shadows. I envisioned the domino effect as each legal maneuver impeded their access to funds, unraveling their web of deceit. I placed each move with precision, guided by a deep knowledge of the financial systems I had mastered decades earlier. Behind these tactical efforts, a persistent image stayed with me, the house we had built together, bought with every penny saved, stitched from years of sacrifice and love. A sanctuary, a legacy, which I could not allow greed to desecrate. Small victories emerged quietly but surely. A creditor alerted here, a loan payment halted there. Confusion rippled through their carefully constructed facade. The calls from banks and creditors unsettled them, eroding the arrogance they wore like armor. Then the confrontation came. Richard, desperate and cornered, preserved the original language of the threats and bluster, attempting to intimidate a man he assumed broken by time. But I met his fury with a composed, unyielding calm, skirted his provocation with evasive answers that hinted at stronger countermeasures to come. His threats hit air. Evelyn's efforts to bridge the chasm only revealed deeper complicity. Her faltering words and anxious glances betrayed the fractured alliance they held together with lies and greed. The family's veneer of unity cracked under the weight of relentless pressure. I took a quiet satisfaction in their unraveling, not from malice, but from a profound sense of justice reclaiming its place. Every stumble they made toward ruin was a step toward restoring the respect stolen from me. Still, a thorn of sorrow pricked through the triumph. Seeing the family I had worked a lifetime to nurture fracture, the trust vanish, was heartbreaking. Yet I reminded myself that true restoration required accountability, regardless of pain. The transformation within me was profound. From protector to tactician, from patient provider to relentless strategist. Each legal freeze, every financial obstacle I placed, echoed with the history of sacrifice and unspoken love that underpinned my fight. The days unfolded with the steadiness of a long campaign, marked by resilience and measured responses. Patience was not weakness, it was my greatest weapon. Sorrow and anger melded within me, forging an unbreakable vow that their schemes would crumble, their lies exposed, and their reckoning would be just and complete. And when that day came, I would stand resolute, no longer a man betrayed, but a bastion of justice, calm, patient, and undefeated. The air in the house grew thick with quiet tension. Walls that had once captured laughter now absorbed hushed conversations and weary footsteps. The family I had nurtured, the bonds forged through years of shared struggle and love, were fraying. Yet within me a stark clarity took hold, a clarity sharpened by betrayal and tempered by resolve. This was not a moment of surrender, but the genesis of a battle carefully waged with intellect and unflinching patience. I began by diving into the complex tangle of financial maneuvers Richard and Evelyn had conjured. Artful deceptions hidden beneath layers of contracts, loans taken out under false pretenses, and debts concealed within shell companies. Each page turned revealed more deceit: ghost signatures, altered agreements, misappropriated funds. Their greed was bold, their cunning meticulous, but not flawless. Taking a methodical approach, I cataloged every irregularity with precision. The dossier that amassed on my desk was more than a collection of documents. It was a living map of their labyrinthine schemes. Every forged signature was a step closer to their unraveling. Every secret account a target for dismantlement. This was no reckless retaliation. It was a surgical strike rooted in years of expertise and personal history. Yet I knew the power lay not in raw force but strategy. Hasty moves could alert them, driving them deeper into shadows or provoking retaliations that might harm what remained of my legacy. So I summoned the quiet strength of patience, recalling the countless nights I'd spent balancing ledgers and navigating bureaucratic labyrinths when our family's future was uncertain. This precision was my armor. To execute this plan, I turned to trusted allies. Margaret, a lawyer whose integrity and sharp mind had earned my lasting respect, and Charles, a former banking associate adept at uncovering hidden financial conduits and interpreting the subtleties of credit networks. Their cooperation was discreet but invaluable, turning my knowledge into actionable advances. Together, we instituted legal freezes on key accounts flagged by the investigation, sending ripples through the web Richard had spun. Notices were discreetly delivered to creditors, and petitions for audits of suspect tax filings were quietly filed. The machinery moved silently but inexorably, setting into motion consequences that would become impossible for my adversaries to ignore. Between these maneuvers, moments of reflection drove home the stakes. I revisited memories of the family home, its sturdy walls built through years of sacrifice and love,
a monument to decades of commitment and hope. That house was not merely real estate. It was the tangible embodiment of our family's shared history. Now, it had become a symbol of the trust they had shattered and my resolve to protect what remained. As the pressure mounted, the first signs of their unraveling surfaced. Creditor calls, once sporadic and polite, escalated to urgent inquiries. Business loans went unpaid, streams of cash weakened, and tensions wove through their conversations like a dark thread.
I could hear the strain creeping into Richard's curt messages, his confident veneer chipping slowly under the weight of his own deception. I would soon face him directly. The confrontation came with the abruptness of a storm. Richard arrived, his face a mask of forced bravado concealing desperation. His threats were sharp, intended to intimidate an old man he believed vulnerable. But he encountered something unexpected. Steadfast calm, a gaze unwavering and fierce beneath composed words. I met his bluster not with anger, but with measured deflection, answering threats with vague but ominous caution. My patience was a shield his arrogance couldn't pierce. Evelyn's attempts to calm the rising storm revealed fissures widely unseen. Her fractured words and furtive glances betrayed the cracks in their alliance. The facade of family unity was crumbling fast. Their house of deception, once tightly held together by lies and shared greed, began to collapse under the relentless pressure of truth. The pressure we applied exposed the truth for all to see. Legal investigations unfolded, tracing money flows, demanding clarifications, exposing the web of fraud. The carefully crafted story Richard and Evelyn told began to unravel publicly. Their lies could not withstand the relentless pursuit of evidence. Yet, amid each victory, I carried a heavy sorrow. Witnessing the family I had built splinter, the loss of trust, the deep rifts, is a wound far deeper than any financial loss. But justice requires sacrifice. Accountability is a bitter medicine, but a necessary one for healing. Weeks turned into months as the campaign wore on, marked not by fireworks, but by a steady, unshakable resolve. My patience was my greatest weapon, each legal motion a calculated strike in a war neither proclaimed nor glorified. Every creditor call, every frozen bank account was a step toward restoring balance and reclaiming what was lost. Beneath my calm exterior, emotions churned, a complex blend of righteous anger, deep sadness, and unwavering determination. These feelings forged a vow that no ploy could break. Their schemes would be obliterated, their lies laid bare, and justice meted out in full measure. When the day of reckoning arrived, I would stand as more than a man scorned. I would stand as a bastion of justice and dignity, quiet yet immovable. The man who had endured betrayal and loss would reclaim his name and legacy, turning patience and intellect into a force neither greed nor treachery could withstand. Though the path was long and fraught, every step, every move was deliberate. I had learned over decades that true power lies in restraint, in seeing the end from the beginning and following through with unwavering resolve. And so, fortified by memories and sharpened by betrayal, I prepared to complete this journey, to restore what was mine, to demand what was owed. Justice was patient, and so was I. The earliest sign of their unraveling came in the form of insistent phone calls, creditors desperate for payments long overdue. It was the first crack in the armor they had so arrogantly worn. Richard's composed veneer, carefully maintained to project control and confidence, began to fracture beneath the weight of mounting debts. Businesses that once pulsed with steady income faltered as invoices went unpaid and missed payments accumulated. Excuses blurred, and his voice that once held dominance was now laced with tension, the strain impossible to hide. Each message I received, every call from a bank or creditor, was evidence of the slow collapse we were precipitating.
It took months of careful determination and silent maneuvering, but the careful web of deceit they had woven around us was being pulled apart thread by thread. The debts, hidden so meticulously by forged signatures and false contracts, now became the chains dragging their efforts down toward ruin. For them, the assumption of my weakness because of age proved their gravest miscalculation. With every halted payment and frozen account, their overconfidence evaporated. Loan payments slipped into arrears, car leases remained unpaid. Financial stability, once their shield, split and broke under relentless pressure. The moment of confrontation was inevitable. Richard came to me one afternoon, clutching at the last threads of his bravado. His words came sharpened with veiled threats, attempts to intimidate the old man they thought beaten and weak. But beneath his rage I saw the truth: desperation, quick breath, eyes flickering with uncertainty. I met his fury not with fire, but with calm resolve. My answers were circumspect, evasive, measured. I let silence and certainty speak louder than threats. It was a calm that rolled like a wave, quiet but unstoppable, a defense stronger than any shield. When Evelyn intervened, trying to mediate, her efforts revealed more than she realized. Her stammering excuses, the glances exchanged with Richard, betrayed their partnership. The family's facade of unity cracked, exposed as nothing more than a fragile construct held together by shared greed and whispered lies. The slow, methodical peeling back of their schemes soon became public knowledge. Audits followed money trails no one expected to be traced so closely. Tax documents came under scrutiny and revealed inconsistencies too glaring to ignore. Their carefully constructed narrative collapsed as mounting proof exposed their deceit in stark relief. As the truth ascended into daylight, I watched Richard and Evelyn's confidence deteriorate, their panic barely contained. Even those once loyal to them now recoiled, hesitant to maintain ties with a house of cards on the verge of collapse. The respect Richard had once commanded dissolved, replaced by suspicion and doubt. Though part of me felt grim satisfaction, it was tempered by an ache deeper than loss of money. Watching the family I had built, nurtured, and loved fragment so profoundly was a wound that cut to the bone. Bonds I had taken decades to forge shattered under the pressure of betrayal. Yet I understood. Justice is never a gentle hand. It demands sacrifice, and sometimes the price is painfully steep. Weeks gave way to months, each marked by quiet perseverance rather than grand gestures. No one victory defined this fight. It was the accumulation of countless small, deliberate actions. Every legal motion filed, every account frozen, every call to a creditor was a calculated step toward restoring balance and reclaiming what was lost. Emotions churned beneath my measured exterior, a complex tempest of righteous anger, profound sadness, and unwavering resolve. These intertwined feelings forged a vow inside me, one that no deception or delay could break. Their corrupt schemes would be shattered, their lies laid bare, and justice meted out in full. When the decisive day finally dawned, I would stand unbowed, not as a broken man, but as a bastion of justice and dignity, calm, patient, steadfast. The man who had endured betrayal and sorrow would reclaim his name and legacy, turning patience and intellect into a weapon no greed or treachery could overcome. The path was long, daunting, fraught with risk. Yet every step forward was deliberate, every move anchored in decades of experience. True power, I had learned, was born not in haste, but in the rigorous restraint to see the conclusion from the beginning and pursue it relentlessly. Memories of past sacrifice, sharpened by present betrayal, fueled my determination. I was ready to bring this journey to its rightful end, to restore what was mine, to exact what was owed. Justice was patient. So was I.
The first phase of retaliation targeted the financial lifelines Richard depended upon. Mortgages, car leases,
and business loans that kept their ventures afloat began to falter as I ensured key payments toward them were stopped. These acts were not rash. They were calculated, executed with surgical precision to maximize disruption while avoiding an early reveal of my plan. The immediate effect was palpable. Supply chains wavered, vendors became unsure. Interest rates on debts soared unexpectedly. Confusion spread rapidly through their circle, panic taking root. Richard's grand plans, once so carefully masked, now unraveled openly, thread by thread. When Richard confronted me again, the desperation was clear, his gaze searching for weakness that was no longer there. His threats echoed hollow against the bedrock of my unwavering calm. I responded with measured, evasive answers designed to frustrate, not provoke. Silence and confident resolve were my shield. His provocations bounced back like water off stone. Evelyn's attempts at mediation crumbled, overshadowed by her obvious complicity.
Her nervousness betrayed her true role, revealing the strain their partnership faced as the storm closed in. The facade of their alliance fractured visibly. Their downfall unfolded before me, stirring a mix of cold satisfaction and deep sorrow. The arrogance and ease with which they once plotted their moves were eroding fast, replaced by panic and mistrust. Even so, I reminded myself that this was no joyous victory. Justice demands a heavy price: fractured families, broken trust, and wounds that often linger beyond restitution. But the debt, a long one, steeped in years of sacrifice and broken trust, had long been overdue, and I would see it repaid in full. The path ahead remained clear: systematic dismantling of their financial control, relentless legal challenges, and an unyielding march toward the justice I sought. Each move was precise, deliberate, inspired by decades of experience, and driven by a quiet resolve. No longer silent, no longer forgiving, I was a strategist, a guardian of justice, a man determined to reclaim his dignity and restore what was rightfully his, whatever the cost. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, like the slow tide edging in to reclaim a shore long denied. The courthouse was unremarkable from the outside, yet inside the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, a gathering of faces both familiar and foreign, all bound by the weight of the moment. There were family friends whose loyalty had been tested, bank officials whose livelihoods intertwined with the truth, and lawyers whose skill would shape the course of justice. I stood among them not as the frail, dismissed patriarch they had underestimated, but as a man fortified by truth and unwavering resolve. Spread before the court was the painstakingly compiled dossier, volumes of evidence assembled over months of quiet labor. Every forged signature, every falsified contract. The text, every secret loan meticulously cataloged, bore witness to the deception crafted by Richard and abetted by Evelyn's complicity. This evidence was no longer buried in shadows. It now lay exposed, prepared to dismantle the carefully constructed lies that had threatened my family and my dignity. Richard and Evelyn sat across from me, their composed facades strained thin by the weight of exposure and impending consequence. Their eyes flicked between the documents and the witnesses, betraying the anxiety beneath their once confident exteriors. It was clear that their reckoning, once a distant threat, now loomed inexorably close. Margaret, my unwavering advocate, took the floor with measured authority. She laid bare the evidence with surgical precision, articulating each instance of deceit with clarity that left no room for doubt. Auditors testified to Richard's misuse of funds, the manipulation of contracts, and Evelyn's role in concealing these offenses. She painted a picture of betrayal woven through layers of financial subterfuge. I listened silently, feeling the gravity of this moment settle into the marrow of my bones. This was not a mere legal proceeding. It was the culmination of a lifetime of sacrifice, the reckoning of betrayal within my own bloodline. Faces around me reflected the unfolding reality: shock, disbelief, understanding. The truth resonated beyond the sterile pages and legal jargon. When the moment came for me to speak, I rose with deliberate calm. I spoke not with anger or accusation, but with the measured voice of a man who had borne the weight of sorrow and betrayal long enough. I recounted the sacrifices made in silence: late nights balancing budgets to cover tuition, years of mortgage payments stretched to their limit, the quiet pride of watching my daughter cross every milestone. The family home, a fortress of years of labor and love, was more than a structure. It was a testament to enduring hope. My words were neither plea nor lament. They were a testament to justice served, to dignity restored. I reminded the court that what they might call vengeance was instead a solemn demand for respect and restitution. The arrogance that had blinded Richard and Evelyn to the consequences of their actions was their undoing. As my voice filled the room, I watched the subtle shifts: the tightening of Richard's jaw, the fleeting glance of regret from Evelyn, the acknowledgement by those witnessing of the truth laid before them. The fortress of lies began to fracture. The hearing pressed on, tension weaving through each testimony and cross-examination. Legal minds picked apart fabrications, exposing contradictions and deceit. Richard's earlier dominance faded, replaced by the burden of mounting evidence and legal reality. Evelyn's silence spoke volumes of her erosion beneath the strain of truth. With the courtroom hushed and the verdict looming, the air thickened with the inevitability.
I felt no triumph, only a profound peace. The arrogance that once shielded them crumbled into dust, replaced by the cold inevitability of justice fulfilled. The family I had loved was irreparably fractured, yet I reclaimed my name, my dignity, and the truth. This was not simply the end, it was a transformation. From the man who endured betrayal, I emerged an architect of restoration. And in that moment, I understood deeply that justice must always be restored, and arrogance punished, without exception or delay. The house was suffused with a quiet emptiness, as if the very walls mourned the absence of what once had been. The laughter that had filled these rooms, the shared celebrations and quiet conversations had faded into memory, leaving behind only shadows of what family life was supposed to be. I moved through the spaces with a heavy heart, each step stirring echoes of moments long past. Years of sacrifice and dedication woven into the fabric of our lives.
The fractures left by betrayal had rendered the family unrecognizable. The ties that bonded us had splintered, perhaps beyond repair. I was keenly aware of the void where warmth and trust once lived. Yet, beneath this weight of loss, a new clarity emerged, a steady strength that I had not known in years. Freed from the suffocation of deceit, I was beginning to reclaim control over my life and purpose. The pain of loss was undeniable, but so too was the relief that came with breaking the chains imposed by their greed and disregard. No longer burdened by the need to constantly contend with hidden agendas and lies, I found in solitude the rare gift of peace. The role of silent provider, the unseen pillar holding a fractured world together, shifted into that of a man who could finally look forward without the shadows of betrayal darkening his vision. The house, though quieter now, remained a monument, not just to the family that had been lost, but to the enduring spirit that remained. Every brick and timber spoke of years of hardship and hope, of struggles born with quiet dignity. It was a fortress built from devotion, not easily undone by the fault lines of distrust that had surfaced. Reflection in these moments brought no bitterness but a sober acceptance. The cycle of loyalty and betrayal, sacrifice and ingratitude had run its course. I faced the future with calm resolve, steady in the knowledge that while wounds lay deep, they were a testament to a life fully lived, not wasted. I came to understand that healing would neither swift nor straightforward. Some scars would never fully fade. Some connections would never be mended. Yet within that acceptance lay a foundation for growth, an opportunity to define my path on my own terms, unshackled by past betrayals. Moments of solitude offered space to grieve what had been lost and to nurture the strength that had kept me standing. Memories of family milestones, graduations, birthdays, quiet evenings by the fire resonated deeply, reminding me that beneath the pain, love had existed and still lingered in quieter forms. The realization settled over me with profound clarity. I may have lost their love, may have witnessed the family I had cherished crumble, but I had reclaimed something far more enduring: my name, my honor, my truth. That reclamation, carved from years of sacrifice and battle, was a debt unpaid and unpayable. As I moved beyond the shadows, embracing the freedom born of justice rightly served, I felt a quiet strength growing steadily within. The past, with all its fractures and betrayals, had forged me into someone new, stronger, wiser, resolute. With measured steps, I closed the door on the chapter defined by loss and began to walk into the light of renewal. The journey ahead promised solitude, yes, but also the peace of living authentically, free from the burdens that once weighed me down. I knew the road would not be easy, that loneliness might often walk beside me as a companion rather than a foe. Yet I faced it without fear, for I carried with me the unshakable knowledge that justice had been served, that dignity was restored, and that from the ruins of betrayal a new life could emerge. Strong, steady, and clear-eyed, I embraced this truth, that I was no longer just a man who had endured. Now I was the architect of my own restoration, the guardian of a legacy untainted by the greed and arrogance that once sought to destroy it. In this new reality, I found a profound freedom rooted not in reconciliation or forgiveness, but in the reclamation of self. I moved forward, carrying the lessons of the past while fully owning the promise of the future. And in the depths of my heart, a quiet conviction settled: that justice must always be restored, and arrogance punished without exception or delay. A truth I had lived, a truth I would carry for the rest of my days.